Have you ever left a meeting thinking, why didn't anyone listen to my idea? Why do some people speak once and everyone stops to listen, while your brilliant suggestions get talked over? Why does your colleague with half your experience get promoted just because they sound more confident? Here's the truth most people don't know. Your ideas aren't the problem. Your delivery is. And I know that stings. You've spent years building expertise, preparing presentations, crafting the perfect points. But somewhere between your brain and their ears, your message loses power. It's not about being louder. It's not about talking more. It's about understanding how human attention actually works. Let me tell you what's really happening. Communication isn't a talent you're born with. It's a skill built on psychological principles that anyone can learn. The executives who command boardrooms, the speakers who captivate audiences, the colleagues who always seem to be heard, they're not special. They just know something you're about to discover. By the end of our time together, you'll have 7 psychological techniques that make people lean in when you speak, remember what you say, and actually take action on your ideas. This will change how the world responds to you in meetings, interviews, negotiations, and everyday conversations. Not because you'll become someone different, but because you'll finally let your real power show. So let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Your words are getting ignored, and it's happening before you even finish your first sentence. The average person decides whether to listen to you in about 3 seconds. 3 seconds. That's shorter than this pause right here. Researchers at Princeton University discovered something fascinating. When we hear someone speak, our brains make instant judgments about credibility, competence, and whether this person deserves our attention. This happens in the amygdala before our conscious mind even processes the words. You could have the solution to your company's biggest problem, but if you don't signal authority in those first 3 seconds, your idea dies before it's born. Think about the last meeting you attended. Someone started talking and you immediately tuned out. You didn't decide to ignore them. Your brain just drifted. Now think about the person who spoke and everyone's laptops closed. Everyone's eyes turned. The room shifted. What was different? Here's what most people miss. Your brain betrays you before your mouth opens. When you're uncertain, when you're asking for permission to speak rather than claiming your space, your voice changes. It rises at the end of sentences, turning statements into questions. Your pace speeds up like you're rushing to get it over with. Your volume drops because part of you hopes no one will actually challenge what you're saying. Powerful communicators don't beg for attention. They command it. And it starts with understanding the 3-second rule. In those crucial first moments, people are scanning for 3 signals: conviction, clarity, and calm. Not volume. Not aggression. Conviction means you believe what you're saying matters. Clarity means you know exactly what you want to say. Calm means you're comfortable taking up space in the conversation. Let me give you something practical. The next time you speak in a meeting, try this. Before you open your mouth, take 1 full breath. Not a gasp, a breath. Then start with a statement, not a preamble. Don't say, "I was just thinking that maybe we could possibly." Say, "Here's what we should do." Drop your voice slightly at the end of the sentence instead of raising it. This signals certainty, not questioning. Stanford researchers found that speakers who paused before speaking were rated as more confident and credible than those who jumped in immediately. That 1 breath gives your brain time to center, your voice time to settle, and your audience time to shift their attention to you. Here's what this looks like in real life. Imagine you're in a weekly team meeting. Your manager asks for input on a struggling project. Most people immediately start talking, overlapping, trying to be heard first. You wait. Just 2 seconds. Then you speak. "I see 3 options here." Your voice is steady. You've already won the room's attention because you're not competing. You're leading. But knowing how to start means nothing if you can't hold attention. And that's where most people fail. They fill every space with words, afraid that silence means weakness. Let me tell you about the most powerful tool you're not using. Silence. Not awkward silence. Not uncertainty. Strategic silence. The kind that makes people lean forward because they need to know what comes next. I call it the power pause technique, and it's how master communicators create emphasis, build tension, and make their words unforgettable. Here's what happens in your listener's brain when you pause. According to research from MIT's Communication Lab, silence creates cognitive space for processing. When you talk continuously, you're not giving people time to absorb your ideas. They're too busy trying to keep up. But when you pause after an important point, their brain replays what you just said, testing it, connecting it to their own experience, deciding if they agree. That processing time is when your idea moves from their short-term memory into long-term memory. That's when you go from being heard to being remembered. Most people are terrified of pauses. They think silence makes them look unprepared or uncertain. So they fill every gap with like, or they speed up and talk faster. This does the exact opposite of what they want. It signals anxiety. It makes the audience work harder to follow along. And it makes everything you say feel less important because nothing gets emphasis. Powerful communicators use pauses the way a musician uses rests. They're not empty space. They're part of the composition. Here's how you practice this. Take any statement you need to make this week. Let's say, we need to change our approach to customer service. Now add strategic pauses, we need to change our approach to customer service. That tiny pause before customer service puts weight on those words. It tells your listener, this next part matters. Pay attention. Try another one. This isn't working versus this isn't working. Feel the difference? The pause creates tension. It makes the person listening wonder, what isn't working? Tell me more. You've created curiosity instead of just delivering information. In high-stakes situations, pauses become even more powerful. Imagine you're in a job interview and they ask, why should we hire you? Most candidates rush to fill the silence with a rehearsed answer. You pause. 2 seconds. You look them in the eye. Then you speak. That pause signals that you're thinking, that you're taking the question seriously, that what you're about to say is considered and true. Researchers at the University of Michigan found that speakers who used deliberate pauses were perceived as more thoughtful, more trustworthy, and more competent than those who responded immediately. The pause doesn't make you look slow. It makes you look intentional. But here's the thing about pauses. They only work if what you're saying is worth remembering. And that brings us to the real problem most people face. It's not that they're not smart. It's not that their ideas are bad. It's that they bury their insights under mountains of unnecessary context and detail. Let me show you what I mean. Someone asks you in a meeting, what do you think about the marketing campaign? Most people respond like this, well, I was looking at the data last night, and I noticed that our click-through rates have been declining over the past few weeks, which made me think about our targeting strategy, and I remember reading an article about how consumer behavior has shifted, so I started wondering if maybe we should consider adjusting our messaging, though I'm not entirely sure, but it seems like we might want to test some new approaches. What do you think? 97 words to say, our campaign needs better targeting. Now watch this. Same question. Different structure. Our click-through rates are dropping. The issue is targeting. We should test new audience segments this week. 20 words. Same information. 10 times more powerful. Why? Because you led with the insight, not the journey to the insight. This is what I call framing over facts. Most people communicate backward. They give you all the data, all the context, all the thinking that led to their conclusion, and then, if you're still listening, they finally tell you what they actually think. Powerful communicators flip this. They start with the conclusion, then support it with context only if needed. Harvard Business School teaches a framework called Context Insight Action, and it's used by consultants and executives worldwide. Here's how it works. Context is the situation in one sentence. Insight is what you discovered or what you believe. Action is what should happen next. That's it. Let's apply it. You need to tell your boss that a project is behind schedule. Most people say, "So, we've been working really hard on the Henderson project, and the team has been putting in extra hours, but we ran into some unexpected technical issues with the integration, and then Sarah was out sick for 3 days, and the client kept changing requirements, so we're probably going to need another 2 weeks to finish everything properly." Here's the same message using context inside action. The Henderson project is 2 weeks behind schedule. The core issue is scope creep from the client, not our execution. I recommend we reset the deadline or reduce deliverables. Your call. Same facts. Completely different impact. The second version respects your boss's time, demonstrates that you understand the problem, and positions you as someone who brings solutions, not just problems. This framework works everywhere. Job interviews. Difficult conversations. Presentations. Emails. Anywhere you need someone to understand, remember, and act. Context inside action. Write it down. Use it tomorrow. But let me give you the scenario where this matters most. The moments when everything is on the line. When you're sitting across from a hiring manager who's deciding your future. When you're presenting to executives who will approve or kill your project. When you're having the conversation that could save or end a relationship. These high-stakes situations are where communication separates the people who rise from the people who stay stuck. Here's what happens in high-pressure moments. Your heart rate spikes. Your palms sweat. Your mind goes blank or races too fast. And suddenly all those communication techniques you know disappear because your brain has shifted into survival mode. This is normal. This is human. But this is also trainable. Researchers at Stanford's psychology department studied people in high-stakes conversations and found something crucial. The people who performed best weren't the ones who felt less anxiety. They felt the same anxiety as everyone else. The difference was they had a protocol. A mental checklist that anchored them when their emotions tried to take over. Let me give you that protocol right now. Before any high-stakes conversation, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. What's the one thing this person needs to understand? Not 3 things. 1 thing. 2. What do I want them to do after this conversation? Be specific. 3. What's the biggest objection they'll have, and how will I address it? That's it. 3 questions. Write them down before the meeting. This gives your anxious brain a structure to hold on to when the pressure hits. Now let's talk about job interviews, because this is where I see smart, qualified people sabotage themselves constantly. They treat interviews like interrogations where they need to prove they're good enough. Wrong frame. An interview is a conversation between 2 professionals exploring if they want to work together. You're evaluating them as much as they're evaluating you. When someone asks, "Tell me about yourself," most people give their entire resume in chronological order. Childhood dreams, college major, every job they've ever had. The interviewer glazes over in 30 seconds. Here's what powerful communicators do instead. They tell a story. A 60-second story that shows who they are and why they're sitting in this room. It follows a simple structure: situation, conflict, resolution, lesson. Let me show you. 5 years ago, I was working in customer support, answering the same complaints every day. I realized we were treating symptoms, not solving problems. So I built a database tracking recurring issues and presented a plan to fix the top 3. We implemented it, complaints dropped by 40%, and I discovered I love turning data into strategy. That's why I'm here. Your role is about solving problems before they become fires, and that's exactly what I do. 60 seconds. You've told them who you are, how you think, what you value, and why you're a fit. Situation, customer support. Conflict, recurring problems. Resolution, data-driven solution. Lesson, I solve root causes. This is infinitely more memorable than, I graduated in 2019 with a degree in business administration and then worked at 3 companies doing various analytical tasks. The same structure works for difficult conversations. Let's say you need to tell a colleague they've been dropping the ball and it's affecting your work. Most people either avoid it until they explode or go in too aggressive and create defensiveness. Here's the story approach. Can we talk for a few minutes? Last month, we agreed you'd send me the weekly reports by Friday so I could compile the summary for Monday's meeting. The last 3 weeks, I've gotten them Sunday night or Monday morning, which means I'm staying late or scrambling that morning to finish. I know you're juggling a lot, but this pattern isn't sustainable for me. Can we figure out what's getting in the way and solve this together? Situation: we had an agreement. Conflict: it's not being met, and here's the impact. Resolution: I want to solve this with you, not punish you. Lesson: implied, we're professionals who can work through this. You've addressed the issue without attacking their character. You've invited collaboration instead of creating defensiveness. For presentations, the story structure becomes even more critical. People don't remember data. They remember stories that contain data. If you're presenting quarterly results, don't start with a spreadsheet. Start with a story about one customer, one challenge, one moment that captures what the numbers represent. Then show the data. Then close with what happens next. But here's where most people get stuck. They know these techniques theoretically, but when the moment comes, they freeze. They default back to old patterns. And this is because knowing isn't the same as doing. You need a practice system that rewires your instinctive responses. Let me tell you about the 5-minute daily practice that changes everything. Not a workshop. Not a seminar. 5 minutes. Every day. That's the difference between people who improve their communication and people who stay stuck knowing they should. Here's the system. Every morning, before you check email, before you start work, you're going to do 3 exercises. 1 minute each. Then you'll use the last 2 minutes for reflection. Exercise 1, the clarity drill. Open your voice recorder or just speak out loud. Set a timer for 1 minute. Pick any topic: what you did yesterday, a project at work, your opinion on something. Now explain it using context, insight, action. Just that framework. 1 minute. Context in 1 sentence. Insight in 1 sentence. Action in 1 sentence. If you ramble, stop and restart. This trains your brain to structure thoughts clearly under pressure. Exercise 2, the power pause practice. Read any paragraph from a book, article, or even an email. But read it out loud with deliberate pauses after important phrases. Exaggerate the pauses at first. Hold them longer than feels comfortable. This breaks your habit of rushing and teaches you to trust silence. Your goal is to feel the discomfort and push through it until pauses feel natural. Exercise 3, the conviction reset. Stand up. Take a deep breath. Now say 1 sentence about something you believe. It doesn't matter what. I deserve respect in meetings. My ideas have value. I communicate with clarity and confidence. But say it like you mean it. Drop your voice at the end. Make it a statement, not a question. Do this 3 times. Different sentences each day. This rewires the vocal patterns that signal uncertainty. That's 3 minutes. 3 exercises. Every morning. The last 2 minutes are for reflection. What communication moment do you have today that matters? A meeting, an email, a conversation. Visualize yourself using 1 technique. Just 1. See yourself pausing before you speak. Hear yourself using context, insight, action. Feel yourself staying calm when someone interrupts. This mental rehearsal prepares your brain to execute when the moment comes. Neuroscientists at UCLA found that daily micro-practices like this create stronger neural pathways than occasional intensive training. 5 minutes every day beats a 2-day workshop once a year. Because communication isn't about learning new information. It's about building new instincts. And instincts come from repetition. Here's what this looks like in real life. Week 1, you feel ridiculous talking to yourself in the morning. Week 2, you start noticing your old patterns more clearly. You catch yourself rambling and think, I should have used context inside action there. Week 3, use one technique successfully in a real conversation. Someone actually listens. Someone asks you to repeat what you said because they want to remember it. Week 4, it starts feeling natural. You're not thinking about the techniques anymore. You're just communicating better. The people who rise in their careers, who become known as great communicators, who command respect in rooms they walk into, they're not doing anything magical. They're doing what you're about to do. They practice. They notice patterns. They adjust. They practice more. But practice alone isn't enough. You need to understand the single most powerful communication tool humans have evolved. The thing that makes people care, remember, and act on your message more than any technique or framework. I'm talking about storytelling. Let me tell you why stories work when facts don't. Your brain is wired for narrative. When someone tells you data, it activates the language processing parts of your brain. Just 2 regions. But when someone tells you a story, your entire brain lights up. The sensory cortex, the motor cortex, the emotional centers, all firing like you're experiencing the story yourself. Researchers at Princeton ran an experiment where they put a storyteller and listeners in separate MRI machines. When the storyteller's brain showed activity in certain regions, the listener's brain showed the same activity seconds later. This is called neural coupling. Your brain syncs with the storyteller's brain. You're not just hearing their words. You're living their experience. This is why you forget statistics but remember stories from childhood. This is why you can't recall the 5 bullet points from last week's presentation, but you remember that time your colleague told you about the client meeting that went sideways. Stories stick because they're how your brain naturally processes and stores information. So here's the question. If stories are this powerful, why aren't you using them more? And the answer is usually, I don't have any good stories, or I'm not good at storytelling. Both wrong. You have dozens of stories. You're living them every day. You just haven't structured them in a way that makes them powerful. Let me give you the 60-second story formula that makes any point 10 times more persuasive. It's the same structure I mentioned earlier, but now we're going deeper. Situation, conflict, resolution, lesson. 4 parts. 15 seconds each. Situation sets the scene. 1 or 2 sentences that put the listener in the moment. Last quarter, we launched a product feature that took 6 months to build. That's it. Not the whole backstory. Just enough to create context. Conflict introduces the problem or challenge. This is where tension lives. 2 weeks after launch, usage was at 3%. We'd built something nobody wanted. See how that creates a question in your mind. You want to know what happened next. Resolution shows what was done. We interviewed 20 users and discovered we'd solved the wrong problem. We pivoted the feature in 3 weeks based on actual user needs. Now the tension releases. There's movement from problem to solution. Lesson extracts the insight. We learned that building fast and iterating beats building perfect and hoping. Now we test with users before we write code. This is the payoff. The thing you want the listener to remember and apply. Situation. Conflict. Resolution. Lesson. 60 seconds. You can use this structure to explain why you're the right hire, why your project should get funding, why your team needs more resources, why your idea will work. Any message becomes more persuasive when it's wrapped in narrative. Here's a real example. You're trying to convince your manager to approve a new tool that costs money. Most people say, this tool will increase efficiency by 15% and has great reviews and other teams use it. That's data. It's forgettable. Here's the story version. Last month, I spent 11 hours manually updating client records because our current system doesn't sync. I made 2 errors that required client calls to fix. Then I found this tool. I tested it on my own data for a week. What took 11 hours now takes 90 minutes, and the sync eliminates human error. The cost is $300 a year. I wasted more than that in billable hours in 1 month. If we implement this across the team, we save roughly 200 hours per quarter. Same request. Completely different impact. Because now your manager isn't evaluating a tool. They're seeing the problem through your eyes, feeling the frustration of wasted hours, understanding the cost in real terms. You've made it visceral instead of abstract. The best part about this formula is you can use it in real time. Someone asks you a question in a meeting. You don't need a prepared speech. Just think, what's the situation? What's the conflict? How is it resolved? What's the lesson? Even a 30-second story using this structure will land better than 2 minutes of explanation. But here's what I want you to understand. All these techniques, all these frameworks, all this knowledge, none of it matters if you don't believe you deserve to be heard. And that's the real barrier for most people. Not skill. Belief. You started this video feeling invisible. Maybe you felt that way for months or years. Watching other people get credit for ideas similar to yours. Seeing colleagues advance while you work harder. Wondering what you're missing, what they have that you don't. Here's what they have. They have the exact framework you now possess. The understanding that communication isn't about being the smartest or the loudest. It's about being clear, intentional, and structured. It's about knowing that your brain decides who to listen to in 3 seconds, so you make those 3 seconds count. It's about using silence as a tool, not fearing it as a gap. It's about leading with insight instead of burying it under context. It's about preparing for high-stakes moments with a protocol that anchors you when anxiety spikes. It's about daily practice that builds instincts, not just knowledge. It's about wrapping your ideas in stories that create neural coupling in your listener's brain. This is what TED speakers do. This is what CEOs do. This is what master negotiators do. And now you do it too. Your voice already has power. These techniques just help the world finally hear it. You don't need to change who you are. You need to change how you deliver what you already know. Clarity wins. Always. Not more words. Better words. Not faster speech. Intentional pauses. Not louder volume. Deeper conviction. Powerful communicators don't beg for attention. They command it. And you command it by respecting your listener's time, structuring your message for their brain, and trusting that your ideas are worth the space they take up in the conversation. Here's what I want you to do. Tomorrow morning, in your next meeting, use one technique. Just one. Maybe it's the 3-second pause before you speak. Maybe it's context inside action when someone asks your opinion. Maybe it's a 30-second story instead of a data dump. Pick one. Use it. Watch what happens. You don't need permission to speak powerfully. You don't need a title. You don't need to wait until you feel completely confident. You just need to start. Because the gap between being invisible and being heard isn't as wide as you think. It's one conversation. One moment. One choice to communicate differently than you did yesterday. The people who get promoted, who build influence, who shape decisions in rooms they enter, they're not special. They just decided to stop hoping someone would notice their ideas and started making their ideas impossible to ignore. You can make that decision right now. Your ideas aren't the problem. Your delivery was. And now it's not. Now you know exactly how to make people lean in when you speak, remember what you say, and take action on your ideas. Now you have the framework. Now you have the practice system. Now you have the choice. So make it. Speak up in that meeting tomorrow. Use the framework. Trust the pause. Lead with your insight. Tell the story. Command the respect you've always deserved. Because the world is waiting to hear what you have to say. It just needed you to say it powerfully. And if you want the full breakdown with real-world examples of each technique, I've created a free PDF guide. You'll find the link in the description. And if this helped you, if you know someone who's tired of being talked over, someone whose brilliant ideas keep getting ignored, share this with them. Because everyone deserves to be heard. Including you. Now go speak powerfully.